Welcome everyone who is on time. It's 11 o'clock, which is our starting time for this session. So I appreciate everyone's ability to join us today. Today's presentation is safe use planning with focus of under pressure and how we react to safe use planning when we're under pressure. So strong planning, training, and supervision prevent workplace fatalities. My name is Tony Grote. I'm IPAF's North American Regional Manager. I've been in the industry for close to 5 decades now. I'm heavily involved with industry standards for mobile elevated work platform. And joining me in co-presenting today is my good friend and colleague, Nick DeJesse. And Nick, you want to just do your own introduction?
Sure. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So my name is Nicholas DeJesse. I'm the former Assistant Regional Administrator for OSHA. Similar to Tony, not as many decades, but 30 years in the business of health and safety management. I am currently the president of DeJesse Consultation Services and a very proud IPAF member.
Great, thank you. So let's move ahead here. The purpose of today's session is to provide you with the work and response effectively under pressure. So again, looking at your teams and how you're going to work, how do we make sure that we put all this in place, especially when we're working under pressure, to drive safer decisions that prevent accidents and personal injuries, to improve industry standard compliance. So while Nick is with me and a proud member of OSHA for many years, while OSHA has regulations in place, it really is our industry standards that are the most up-to-date means for us to really comply with the safe operation and use of this equipment. And last but not least is the end goal is to increase productivity, cost savings, and risk reduction. And that really is what the value of doing planning is in place. So really what does compliance mean as a statement in itself? Well, operating MUPS is in line with laws, regulations, and standards. So specifically OSHA regulations, the ANSI SAI A92 standards. If you're in Canada, CSA standards. And, in the broader sense, when you're getting into the fall protection, there's the ANSI Z359 standard. So really looking at all of the laws and regulations and standards that apply to the task that you're undertaking. The real key to compliance means maintaining a safe work environment free from hazards. So if there is a core focus, it's having that safe work environment, recognizing hazards and avoiding them, and ensuring that workers are trained and competent for their roles. So there's a real big focus on operator training, and operator training is obviously a very key component to MUP safe operations, but it's not the only individual who needs to be trained and competent for their roles. And last but not least is following the original equipment manufacturer's instructions for use, inspection, and maintenance, the operator's manual that's on every machine that's in the marketplace. So if you're doing these things, you have a level of compliance to what all of the regulations are in place. So what are those regulations and standards specifically? We have the OSHA regulations, which I'll say are generally workplace safety requirements. It is by the 5A1, it is ensuring that you have a workplace that is safe from recognized hazards. When you're looking at the ANSI A92 standards, they're the U.S. standards for MUP design, safe use, and training for this equipment. So it gets into a deeper level of detail on what the industry best practices are for the design, safe use, and training of this equipment. And then we end up having the OEM manuals, which are the specific requirements for that particular machine in place, the operator's manual. So all of these things really intertwine with one another, with the MUP standards, the ANSI A92 standards being really the foundation about what we think about in terms of compliance. So when you're looking at why safe use planning matters, Here we have a pictorial about the industry standards, which define the requirement for producing a MUP-specific safe use plan. So when you're looking at this pictorial, it really gives you an idea of all of the elements that must be involved in training. So having trained personnel, having the trained operator is one piece of it, and it's the trained operator, but it's trained personnel. So again, you can also see today we have trained supervisors who are required to evaluate the operator's proficiency. We'll get into some of these details as we move along. But again, the basic premise for the safe use planning is to identify hazards before the work begins, to select the appropriate MUP for the task to be performed, to coordinate the people, equipment, and site conditions, and to reduce injury risk, downtime, and property damage. So the safe use plan encompasses a lot of particular items that need to take place. So the core elements of a safe use program come from the ANSI A92 standard. And within that standard, in section 4.2, which is my favorite section, it's safe use planning, which is the systemic approach to planning for safe operations. And here it says that a safe use program specific to MUPS shall be developed by the user of the equipment and shall include, and it has a whole list, which includes everything that you saw in that last pictorial that needs to be involved with it. Ultimately, it's saying, I need to do a risk assessment. I need to make sure that I control all of the potential hazards that are in front of me. I need to make sure that I'm getting the appropriate MUP for the selection, the type, the capacity, the reach. It gets into all of these details that really combine to ensure safe operations. Work site preparation, making sure that we have the ground support that will hold this machine up, that we have access to the areas that we need to bring the equipment into, that we're making sure that there are no obstructions in the way of operation, driving, traveling, elevating, rotating, etc. So it's making sure that at the end of it, if we do have an issue, we have a rescue plan for emergency retrieval processes. And we need to make sure that all the responsibilities, training, and monitoring are in place. Operator, supervisors, spotters. So there's a lot involved in planning. And if you're missing a part of it, it's going to lower your ability to say that we're going to control the risks that are on our particular job site. Here you see a view of a MUP Safe Use Program guide. So this was developed by IPAF, and it really goes into detail to assist you in being able to create your own MUP-specific program. There's lots of tools that are involved with this. So when we look at the standards and we go through these details, you can say, okay, I need to pull the standard out and I need to build something that complies with this. This is a tool that helps you apply each of those requirements into your safe use plan. Here, if you go to developing a safe use plan at IPAF's website, you can download this. It's available for free. So it's a tool that you can use to create your own safe use plan. And again, it's a plan. We need to make sure that the plan is implemented. So within our plan, one of the new things that was introduced is supervisors. So while we have a requirement for operators and training for them, we also have supervisors. And within the supervisor's role within the standards, it's to monitor the performance of the work of the operator to ensure compliance with the provisions of the standard with that safe use plan. Monitor, supervise, and evaluate the operators on a regular basis is a requirement that will ensure their proficiency through a visual observation at a minimum, and this must be documented. So if you're not aware of this, this is the requirement that's in the standards today when we're talking about compliance. It's don't train your operator and say, okay, now he is, the best operator in the marketplace. It's like everything else. You go from being an apprentice to a journeyman through experience of feedback and continuous learning. And then we have the supervisor who has the responsibility to be the point person for operators. So when the operator has an issue on the job site, they notify the supervisors, and they must do as their supervisor informs them. And then at the end of the day, based on their observations, they may be doing retraining, which is the required instructions based on the user's observations or evaluations to maintain their skill level as they were when they were trained. This may include things like toolbox talks, the weekly meetings, safety meetings. There's lots of different approaches to this, but it really is saying that based on the observation, we need to make sure that they build their skills as we move forward. So when we're looking at what are the roles of the supervisor, it's to ensure that the safe use plans are followed. So while we have the plan, we need to make sure that everyone is aware of it and are complying with it. They need to monitor the operator's compliance with the procedures, provide site-specific briefings and updates. Jobs change on an ongoing basis, and we need to make sure that we are adapting to what the actual site requirements are. We need to coordinate rescue readiness with the team. So when we're looking at having an emergency situation, some type of an incident in place, you need to make sure that we're ready for that and be qualified for the task by completing MUP supervisor training, which is a requirement within the training standard, which is A92.24. So those are all of the requirements for a supervisor that ties into safe use planning. So planning is, did you consider other items? One of the things that you're not going to see in the standards is us talking about how to work under pressure. So think about it from this perspective, which is what are the things that are out there? We drive productivity. We have deadlines. We have cost controls. We have worker shortages, site changes, weather conditions constantly changing, and last but not least, the risk of having an accident. So all of these things are items that or tasks that need to be identified, and make sure that you are considering them when you're doing your planning, because all of these things will impact what the workers on site are doing. So when we're looking at this and we tie this back into it, which is what is the message that your workers are really hearing? Is safety really job number one, or is that your marketing ploy versus productivity really being the key focus and what everybody really knows? So there was a survey that was taken, and 1 in 3 workers believe productivity is valued more than safety in their organizations. 33% of workers think that safety is not key, is not job number one. Productivity is. 48% of safety meetings are not held as often as they should be. So the impression that you have is there are some people who are doing a real good job at it, but it's telling you at least half of the marketplace is going over and saying it's not being done at the level that it needs to be from the worker's perspective. And then you take it down to the next level, which is half of the temporary or contract workers survey say that they were afraid to report safety issues. That, hey, if I don't do it, they're going to get someone else to do it. So we get to the stage where the messages that we're creating in our plans and in our cultures really are going to impact how people perform out in the field. So I tried to look at incidents that are occurring out in the marketplace, and I'm looking at these things and just saying, well, we have great standards that if everyone followed these things, we'd have 0 accidents in the marketplace. And I'm looking, I'm saying, but we still consistently have not just through MUPS, but all accidents that occur that are reported through the OSHA's Fat Cat report, over 5,000 fatal accidents every year in the United States. So something is going on and we're missing something. So I'm looking at this and saying, well, what are some of the impacts of time pressure? So we're going over there and looking at saying the negative part is when we're under pressure, we reduce attention to detail. We take shortcuts. safety steps are missed. So we're getting to the point where you can just see where everyone's in a hurry and my safety belt, it's back in the truck and I just need to do this for a moment. You can see how under time pressure, things are going to be short missed. But when we take this plan into place, we have a heightened focus and energy. The adrenaline can sharpen short-term performance. So when you're in the midst of battle, as we would say, you're always out there getting ready and doing the things the right way every time. Under pressure, we have increased error rates. Rushing leads to mistakes. Whereas if we have things in under pressure and we're doing things right with a good plan, efficiency problems solving, that the workers may quickly adapt to methods to meet those goals. So if you have a good plan in place, everyone's aware of it, we practice it. When you get to the point where the pressure is on, we still are doing the right things. And then we get to the point where we have tunnel vision, we have fatigue, we have stress buildup. So you're seeing the impacts of these things are going to degrade the positive results that we're looking to achieve. Whereas when we have a good plan in place and we practice it and everyone's aware of it, we have increased teamwork and the crews collaborate more closely under shared urgency. So you can see the teams working together and saying, hey, don't do that. And they can correct each other and support each other in the process. So under emergency pressing, so look at an accident rescue. So here we have panic response. The impulse actions can worsen the situation. That you have people who can freeze literally on the job sites, not knowing what to do, as opposed to having a strong action drive. So the adrenaline can actually motivate them to respond quickly and appropriately. Under that emergency pressure, we have breakdown in communications. It's unclear whose role it is, who's doing this, who's supposed to be doing this, mixed messages of what's going on, where as opposed to you have clear prioritization. Survival and rescue becomes the only focus. So again, it really is getting to the point where you know what's supposed to be done and you practice it and you're ready to respond appropriately. And then skills do fade under stress. So if you have rescue drills aren't practiced, memory recall drops, timely response falters, as opposed to under the ingrained training, well-rehearsed rescue procedures become automatic. So this is the part of saying, how do I make sure that all of my safe use plan gets in place? And I know that pressure's out there. It is this practice and repeating of the same things to make it routine and automatic that are really critical. So with that, I'm now going to switch it over to Nick. I'm going to let Nick share some of his insights. You there, Nick?
Yes, I am, Tony. I'm sorry. I was just trying to, I think you were giving me control, but it seems like
I
it's
did. I just did.
awesome. So, as Tony was mentioning, in the sense of planning and the keys, obviously, to some success, it really goes back to what I do in the emergency management world, which is the planning, training, and exercise cycling. So we develop a plan, we train to the plan, then we exercise the plan. Because if the alarm actually does sound and we do have to do a rescue, as Tony is mentioning, and from a lot of other factors that were there, we've become very familiar with it. Not only that, we create the memory to actually just react and take care of things instead of having that flight or fight kind of thing with your sympathetic nervous system and not being able to respond appropriately. So, as it's mentioned here, for these factors that influence the outcome, repetition is key. It makes our corrective actions obviously automatic, even when we're under stress. Because why? Well, we've practiced it. That's why. So it becomes part and parcel. We have clear procedures, meaning that in this planning, Tony's going to know what he's responsible for, Nick's going to know and understand what he's responsible for, and how we're going to take action to do so. We have a presence there, and some of what Tony was talking about, especially about being under pressure and meeting deadlines and controlling costs and things of that nature, oftentimes there's a leadership absence when it comes to this, and that's why you'll start to see some behaviors which can influence negative outcomes, not positive outcomes. So in this case, at least, we want a presence from leadership. We want calm, competent supervisors. We want supervisors that obviously have a certain level of training, knowledge, skills, and ability as well. And on top of that, what we are developing, whether we call it or not, is a preparedness culture. We are prepared to actually undertake something that goes awry. We are prepared to undertake the responsible actions that we need to implement if there is some type of incident as well. These drills make us better at what we do, and it puts us under obviously a time constraint, which puts us under pressure, which means we can act during it as well. So for our planning and training and drills, as I mentioned earlier, again, I apologize if I use the PTE cycle, but it's very analogous to what is done in emergency management. So with your safe use planning, again, it should account for realistic deadlines to prevent this rushed work. But I know that's not the real world. And I say that based upon the fact of helping a couple employers actually within the past week. And them telling me, "Hey Nick, we're supposed to hand over or turn over the project to an owner on Monday, which was a couple days ago. We actually had to ask for an extension, but we were probably about 6 weeks behind when it comes to doing the work or completing what needs to get done." Well, that's the old trying to put a square peg into a round hole, if you think about it, because of the fact of just time is not on your side. So as Tony was mentioning, some behaviors are going to be out there and some activities are going to be out there are not going to be productive for doing things, properly and or correctly. In that safe use planning, what does it help us do? It helps us align and gives us that framework for setting up the expectations and setting up the positive outcomes. Along with that, we're going to plan to do rescue. We're going to drill to do rescue as well. So folks have become much more effective and actually efficient when it comes to emergencies. We're going to have that supervisory oversight that was mentioned earlier. Again, we want to put people under pressure. There's things that I do in another realm when I teach leadership that I put people under pressure to where they actually have to make decisions and good decision making. When we do this type of planning and training in these drills, that decision making actually comes more automatic. Time doesn't necessarily have to be on your side when in fact you're familiar with what you need to do in that moment. And of course, it actually prepares us to have mental readiness. It's the readiness that actually helps us to maintain performance and be able to take on tasks under these types of pressures and under this type of stress. Let's see, Tony. She doesn't like it. Yep, she likes me now. She's going across. So operator training and competence, and Tony touched upon this a little bit out of the 892 standard, and I do want to mention this as well. When he was mentioning about standards, and we're talking about regulatory requirements, keep in mind that OSHA is baseline. It is minimal, and that's the way that it should be looked at. On a scale, if I was in a classroom and I was telling you, hey, you can go from an A to an F, the OSHA standards are probably about a C to C minus. So keep that in mind. The ANSI standards, obviously, and the Canadian standards as well, go a lot more in depth in the sense of saying, okay, how to do certain things, when to accomplish things, what kind of things are at greater depth and greater granularity when it comes to operator training, when it comes to demonstrating competence and things to that nature. You need to obviously have that knowledge, skills, and ability for safe operation techniques. But that's not just only for the operator. This comes obviously for the entire crew. And Tony mentioned something that was very vital earlier, which was the spotter. Again, same site as last week that I would talk about. A lot of machinery running in and around the site. My comment to all was, how did we not have an incident in the sense of striking either equipment, striking people, or striking materials that were strewn across? Because again, we're under a deadline, become very task-oriented. We're not actually focused in on some of the attention we need to have, which is on not only the operation, but the safety and the health of our people when we're actually doing this operation. That operation training competence actually has to demonstrate hazard awareness, has to understand what not only hazard awareness is, but also the controls for that hazard awareness. And this planning, the safe use plan, of course, is, to me at least, what I would call in the world of industrial hygiene, the anticipation phase of the cycle. So we anticipate, we recognize, we evaluate, control, but it's the anticipation phase because that's where we're actually going to talk about what those potential hazards are. That's where we're going to anticipate again what those hazards are and come up with the proper controls for do so. Along with that training as well, we should have some hands-on skills and evaluation. We actually have to have somebody that's trained to do so. And then there should be ongoing evaluation to maintain that proficiency as well. The next slide here is actually happens to be one of my favorites. And if you can scan the QR code, fantastic. But it's the power of repetition. And I would ask folks that are on the webinar today that click on or at least go across following the arrows when it comes to tile and see where you are with your program. See where you are in the sense of development. See where you are in, hey, do we actually select the correct MUP? Again, going back to a recent experience, and I was telling Tony this, they had a scissor lift that was in action. They were utilizing in a boiler room. They were changing over from old boiler equipment to new boiler equipment. And I looked up and I said, wow, that's interesting. How do you actually get the MUP in and around some of the equipment so you could change it out? They were like, well, we don't. We actually stop it at a certain height and then we climb up onto the rails to actually complete the task. And I said, was that the correct MUP maybe for the operation? So again, and in adherence to what is in the ANSI standard, let's select the correct MUP. Let's conduct that risk assessment. Let's look at safe work procedures and go through the tiles. Let's develop those emergency response plans and drills. We'll verify, obviously, operator proficiency, supervisory oversight, and training as well. And then we're going to engage those competent people that are part of this process. This is all cyclical if you think about it, though, because this plan that you're doing has these elements of repetition. It's going to reinforce these key safety concepts that you have. It's going to build what we call muscle memory and good habits. Over time, we do develop, unfortunately to say, bad habits. We're trying to eliminate as many bad habits as possible through the power, not only of repetition, but also through the power of planning. It also counters, obviously, fade and then complacency as well. So, your skills will continue to be honed. Complacency obviously goes away, or we're trying to erase that. It's also good for retaining workers and retaining employees. Why? It is building a culture. It is building a culture for an employer that says, we care. Not only do we care about being task-focused or task-oriented, we need to get the job done. We are going to do it in a manner to where your safety is of utmost importance and our productivity can be obviously accomplished as well. We should also include in their refresher training with this repetition and applicable toolbox talks, ones that are related back to the operation at hand and the hazards that are there at the site. Bear in mind that compliance is not a one-time task. It's an ongoing commitment, not only to safety, but also to standards, whether they're from OSHA, from ANSI, or from Canada as well with the Canadian Standards Association. So in our rescue planning, what are we doing? Well, we're trying to identify where we're going to have an emergency situation. And from the pictures that are there on the right, you could see we could have an entrapment. We could have a possibility of contacting a live electrical line. We could have an individual that falls out of a unit, or a unit actually gets struck by, as you can see in the lower right-hand portion, and the individual comes catapulting out of the platform. These are the things that we're looking to do, which is, okay, so let's identify what can possibly happen. From there, we're going to define who is going to be responsible for what. Tony, you're the supervisor here on the site. You are going to be responsible for X, Y, and Z. Nick, you're the operator. You're responsible for A, B, and C. These are the things that need to be laid out. And of course, Tony touched on it as well, the equipment that is in use. One of your biggest friends that you could have is the OEM, is that original equipment manual that folks actually should be reviewing and looking through to even assist with rescue planning. From there, we want to train the team on rescue procedures. What exactly is everyone going to do when they're under pressure? What are they going to be responsible for? Are we going to actually have to alert 911? Can we do the rescue here at the site? And we should practice these drills as time goes along as well. We have a short video for you here. I'm going to hopefully hit play and it's going to go playing for you. But bear in mind, this is a bucket truck rescue where there's an electrical contractor. It's a lineman company that is actually doing some work, and it goes from there. Now, mind you, these are qualified individuals who have actually are donned and doffed the proper personal protective equipment, but watch their activities as they go through. Playing on my end, Tony. Can you see it and hear it?
Yes.
And what that clock just started doing was how much time in the sense of rescue it took from when the incident occurred, which is an electrical contact, to the supervisor on scene, on site, what his or her activities are at that moment, and how the rescue will continue. You can see that the supervisor is now lowering the bucket. There was not continuous contact, obviously, which could potentially energize the unit. Now he is bringing down the employee that was in the bucket conducting the work. As you can see there, they're going through this drill. Obviously, that's scenario based in the sense of simulation with a real individual up top. And then what the individual does from the operator side of the house, but also the supervisor side. All right, Tony, let's hope
Advance.
I can advance through it. Let's see if it loves me or not. It does. There we go.
So if I can join in here for a second, Nick,
Yep.
a couple of the elements in there are, if you watched it, think about what you would have done or what someone could have done when he was lowering that platform to the ground. Think about him bringing the platform down the ground and how he first disconnected his fall protection. Think about you forgetting to do that, and all of a sudden you're trying to pull him out. You get him halfway out, and he's still connected. Think about how he tipped the platform down as opposed to trying to pull him over the top of the platform because on that particular device didn't have a gate. And thinking about having all that weight, the subtleties that were involved with that are really significant. And that's why getting it to the point where you would do a practice drill on this type of an event is really critical, because there are elements that are in there that were very subtle that you may not have ever even seen looking at it as a first time user of this. And when you're into I'm going to say crisis situation, things completely change, and what you remember and how you react could be completely different.
Yeah, and Tony, to dovetail into that, I would humbly recommend that if when you're running these drills, actually, yes, you're going to have players, but you should have an evaluator or evaluators as well that are watching the activities and are familiar with what has to get done. Because, as Tony pointed out, there are subtleties that were done in that rescue that if I was on the site and I had never been trained and I obviously know how to lower the bucket at this point, but then, like you're saying, there's little subtleties about trying to pull somebody up and over, not disconnecting the fall protection, putting them in a position to actually render care and get them prepared actually for transport potentially. That comes with repetition for sure.
Right. And I will add to this is that was an insulated aerial device. If you get to the point where the majority of aerial work platforms in the marketplace are not insulated and they come in contact with it, we have unfortunately seen people run to the machine that is still energized, and actually they are more seriously injured or killed trying to lower it when they come in contact with the machine. So when you go to some of these incidents that occur and you end up having the professionals come in, they won't even approach the machine until the lines are de-energized.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. So what do we do here? Well, we're trying to link, actually. We're trying to link our planning, we're trying to link our training, and we're also trying to link the oversight of what occurs here. And this is a constant improvement process, if you think about it, to where we're assessing the not only safe use plan, but also the content of the safe use plan as well. We're looking at training and ensuring operators can follow the plan. We're looking at and assessing that supervisors can monitor that ongoing proficiency. Plus, as well, we're doing these things that we watched actually in that video in the sense of how do we integrate the rescue plan into our daily operations? How do we actually execute the rescue plan as well? And even in that one element of the entire safe use plan, and we're just looking at rescue, how do we actually improve what we do on that side? So all of these elements, and Tony had mentioned this probably in the beginning of the presentation, when you looked at the menu, if you will, of various areas and elements within your planning, why you need to actually have these to be more granular and unpacked a little further to be as efficient as you can be. So some best practices that are out there, of course, conducting daily workplace inspections. I will tell you from the first time that I met Tony and then there on, anyone using a MUP, I have shared their daily inspection checklist with. Most folks that I ran into in industry were telling me, yeah, we really don't have anything that we can utilize, and IPAF has a wonderful daily inspection list. There are things that come from the manufacturers as well with some of those inspections that you can check your equipment. The last thing you want to do is actually need the assistance or lose energy or lose oil on things of that nature when you're actually operating the equipment and you're 80 to 100 feet in the air and you're like, uh-oh, what do I do now at this point? You want to review, obviously, your safe use plan with everyone involved. That's not only, obviously, the operator, that's the spotter, that's the supervisor. That could potentially be on a multi-employer site as well with other contractors that are in and around the area, even through discussion to tell them what you have and what you're doing with it. Utilizing these checklists and other visual aids brings consistency. Consistency to the crew, consistency to the employer as well. Keeping in mind, they need to be verified that we're actually doing these things. You want to keep your records for documentation purposes and compliance. That could be obviously not only in the realm of standards, but that could also be in the realm of litigation in this country. And then, of course, what are we trying to do here? We are trying to, and Tony touched on this earlier on one of his slides, we're trying to promote a culture of speaking up, of giving workers a voice. If we sit there and say, hey, 1 out of every 2 employees doesn't want to speak up for whatever reason, fear, they believe they won't be taken seriously and things to that nature, you have to sit there and say, well, wait a second. Are we actually developing and crafting the culture that we want? We want folks to have a voice in the workplace. We want them to raise their concerns. The other thing is all of us, whether it's myself, whether it's Tony, everyone brings experiences to the forefront. We bring these experiences to the table. My eyes may not have ever seen something of this nature or magnitude, but yours may have. And if yours did, I would want to hear your opinion. I would want to hear your comments because you have a certain level of experience or expertise that I may not have. This actually enhances our entire program if you think about it. So it's constantly actually trying to rebuild and continue that process with our safe use plan. So again, only around 1 in 2 people raise their safety concerns. So you have to think about, hey, is there a safety voice or is it safety silence? What does prevent people from speaking up? What motivates people to speak up? I think you have to have these conversations with folks in and around your company. That's first and foremost. I think you need to create safe space, as I like to call it as well, so people can actually step up and actually have a voice in there as well. And of course, whatever they're bringing up as a concern is their concern. So we need to, as leaders within the world of health and safety, be empathetic toward that. We need to put ourselves in other people's shoes, whether we believe it's a high-level concern or low-level concern. Putting yourself in their shoes gives you perspective, or different perspective, I like to say. So some key takeaways from not only the slides, but the presentation today is that planning, training, supervision, and rescue readiness are inseparable. They're part of, and Tony called it systemic, I call it part of the framework for your success. We need to look at these elements individually. We need to build them out individually, but we have to bring them all together actually in order to have positive outcomes. Repetition and that muscle memory, as I like to call it, strengthens retention. It strengthens obviously your skills. It continues to build your skill set. It also raises your level of hazard awareness. If I can raise your level of hazard awareness, what else am I going to raise with that? The hazard control, the elimination of the hazard, or the reduction of the risk that comes along with it. And bearing in mind that safety is planned, it's practiced, it's supervised, it's reviewed. It is cyclical as well. It is constant. It has to be looked at constantly from a planning perspective, from practicing what we're doing, and of course the oversight that comes with it as well. So something I may have stolen from Tony when I first met him was that practice, you'll hear the phrase practice makes perfect. Well, he's a bigger fan of saying practice makes permanent. So what we were trying to do is not just practice to say, hey, we practice. This isn't Allen Iverson when he would say, hey, we're talking about practice. No, we want to practice the right things. We want to practice the right behaviors. We want to reinforce the right behaviors. We want to reinforce the right attitudes as well. Tony, in some sessions that he has done for me in the past when I was at OSHA, he would always talk about the fact of, hey, when the job's done, everyone gets a clap and we move on. But what other micro elements that were in there that we missed? Part of that are the safe work practices. Part of that are the safe procedures. Part of that are the safe habits that we're trying to build and we're trying to make permanent at all of our job sites. And something to think about here is that, and I always have said this, is safe. The word safe, depending on where you come from, could have different meanings. There is no global harmonized system when it comes to what does safe mean to someone. So feeling safe and being safe might not necessarily be the same thing. Some of us have worked higher risk jobs, so feeling safe may not be what I consider being safe. A quick example, I don't like to climb tower cranes any longer, but I know people have to erect tower cranes and go hundreds of feet up into the air. That I may think that I'm being safe in the sense of using a fall arrest system with a double lanyard and self-retracting lanyards and so on and so forth. But the feeling is not there for me. So keeping in mind, feeling safe and being safe are not necessarily the same. So I put up a few pictures here for folks to think about in the sense of your planning, but also your understanding of risk. And as you look across the gamut of these photos, there's a couple analogies that come to mind, but let's start with the individual that is up on the left-hand side there, whose machine doesn't get extended to where he or she needs to get to. So what do? They put out a couple planks. You have an individual standing on the back end of the planks like a seesaw, and this individual goes outside the level of protection of the rails to get the task accomplished. In the middle, we have an aerial lift there that is on some type of, I believe, plywood, maybe as cribbing or as a device to keep it level. On the top right-hand portion there, we have a mute being used in a roadway. We have a truck almost like sliding in the home underneath the tag, missing the boom of the aerial lift there. The bottom left, we have an individual that actually exited outside of the basket and is working on that sloped roof there. And then the bottom right, which is one of the more dangerous things I have seen actually in person before, is where someone sets up a pick between two mobile units and now standing on a ladder to gain extra height. Why? Because they didn't plan properly in the sense of, can we actually reach the level we need to reach? So the question I pose to you is, these activities might not have resulted in an incident in the sense of a fatality or injury. So are they therefore safe?
And if I just tap into that, the issue that you have with those pictures and the fact that none of those resulted in an accident, how many of those workers are going to go and do that same thing on the next job? How many of those got kudos from their job, from their boss saying, good job, got the job done, found a way to get it done. And that is that practice. And again, if you're practicing the wrong thing, practice doesn't make perfect, it makes it permanent. And they will continue to perform those same tasks improperly over and over again, because that's what they were trained to do.
Absolutely. And that's part of what you see here again in the next slide that talks about how do we make these practices permanent, but removing obviously of the risk and or the danger. We have our friend here who gets up on top of the rails. He looks like he's making a phone call. He may have some type of personal fall arrest system on, but obviously he is not connected to anything. These are typical incidents that you will continue to see. And as Tony said, you'll get a call from the supervisor that says, "Hey, Tom," or "Hey, Jane, thanks for getting that job done. You know, you went to all nths and lengths that you could go to get the job accomplished. But did we actually do it in a manner to where we actually prevented the injury or a possible illness or even fatality? Did we take on those practices or those habits that actually create safer methods? Or are we continuing to do things that can produce a higher risk or a higher percentage of us getting injured or getting killed? So why do we want to make these things permanent, especially the practices that are dangerous, or remove them being dangerous? Well, one, higher risk of incident or accident. Two, we're wasting time and resources in the grand scheme of things when you don't plan properly. And Tony mentioned this all the way in the beginning, which is talk about the risk before the work begins. We give a lot of people out there a false sense of competence and a false sense of safety when we just throw a body harness and a lanyard on and say, "Hey, go at it and get the task done." We are humans. Our behavior is very task oriented, but that doesn't mean that we need necessarily be dangerous or at least risky about the behaviors that we bring into this. And of course, it'll give you a false sense of compliance or approval when it comes to either an OSHA standard or an ANSI standard as well. So following up on what Tony was talking about earlier in supervisor training, it goes back to, again, proper selection of the correct mute to be done for the work being performed, the rules and regs and standards that apply to mutes. Again, you have some limited things from OSHA, but you have some excellent things out of the ANSI standard out of A92 that can be followed. You have potential hazards that are associated with all mutes and their use. These need to be identified and eliminated as much as possible. The supervisor as well needs to have knowledge of the manufacturer's operation manuals. Again, these are a key component from the planning perspective when it comes to safe use plans. It also gives the supervisor that level of knowledge, skill, and ability to be able to take care of situations that pop up along the way, or instantaneous type hazards, or rescue, as we talked about earlier. So, where can you get MUPE supervisor training? Well, there's a few places actually. One, you can do the online e-learning course, which is through IPAF. Two, there's some centers that are out there, and they are also members of the IPAF community and family. That's SAIA, which is Scaffold Access Institute Association. You have United Rentals that does it as well, Sunbelt Reynolds, and Construction Safety Council. But bearing in mind, you can do the e-learning course. You go at your own pace. You go at your own convenience. It's available 24/7, and then once you are done with completion, you can download your certificate. So to follow up, or at least, put this a little bow on it again, we're going to think about the portion of let's correct it, let's repeat it, let's master it. So we plan it, we validate that method and the steps that are part of our plan. We practice it, obviously following that plan consistently. We evaluate it. We check the performance and correct the errors. It's continuous improvement as we go. And that's the refinement portion, which is adjust the plan as needed. Come back again to the beginning of the cycle with the planning method that we have implemented, and plan and train and exercise the workforce for success. Tony, I think I have to give control back to you.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So again, first and foremost, thank you, Nick, for your contributions today. Nick just happens to be the newest IPAF member for us in North America. Nick, as I said, his prior career was with OSHA, where we met and we worked together to, again, for the same mission, which is to promote safety for workers in the field. And our focus is on mobile elevated work platforms, powered access equipment, gas climbers, and hoist. So I really appreciate his contribution to today's webinar. Uh, Again, we did put up a slide over there. Well, IPAF is having our annual event, Work at Height Conference and Awards, in October in Nashville. So here's a great opportunity to actually get exposed to a lot more information on working at height safely, and also have an ability to network with lots of great people like Nick at the event. Uh, so that concludes today's session. There is a chat box, so if anybody has any questions, you could have typed those into the chat box. We'd be glad to entertain any questions that you have for Nick or myself. You have my contact information on the screen that you can get a hold of us in the future if you need. This presentation has been recorded. So if you like this and you would like to share it with other people, the link will be available and be sent to anybody who registered to the event. So we'll give you a minute to identify any questions, and if we hear none, we will adjourn. And thank you for your time today.
I think you wowed everyone, Tony. They're
I think it
questionless.
was you. I think it was you. Going once, going twice. We will assume that we did a sufficient enough job that we answered your questions on the topic today. We, again, appreciate everyone's time and energy, and we will now adjourn today's session. Thank you very much, all.